Before dawn, a cold wind slides through the battlements of an early medieval fortress, stirring the torchlight that guards the sleeping king. Flames tremble against damp stone as armored figures move in silence, each step measured, each breath held tight. The corridors feel alive with tension, as though the walls themselves understand what is about to break. Below the upper chambers, whispers carry like blades drawn from sheaths, sharp and certain. Far above, King Sigebert of Austrasia shifts beneath heavy furs, unaware that betrayal is already climbing the steps toward him. The scent of wet earth and burning resin drifts through his tent while the distant hiss of steel brushes the air. Outside, the conspirators gather beneath a shuddering torch, their faces half hidden, their resolve set long before this night. Brothers whisper to cousins, rivals glance at allies, each man knowing that his survival depends on striking first. Inside the sleeping quarters, the king's guards drift between duty and exhaustion. Their boots leave prints in the dirt, but their attention falters just long enough for danger to slip past. A shadow glides through the threshold, followed by another, and the sound of metal softens under cloth-wrapped hands. No alarm rises. No warning comes. By the time the king opens his eyes, the room has already shifted against him. Figures stand at the edges of the lamplight, motionless but tense, as though carved from the darkness itself. His breath catches in confusion before recognition floods his face. These are not foreign invaders. These are men who once shared his table, bowed before his throne, and pledged their loyalty beneath the sight of God. The first blade descends with brutal certainty. A second follows before the king can rise from his bedding. Fabric tears. Wood cracks beneath a sudden struggle. The tent fills with grunts and harsh exhalations as Sigebert reaches for a weapon that is no longer within reach. His voice never becomes a command. It becomes a gasp swallowed by the storm of steel. By the time the attackers withdraw, torchlight flickers across a ruler who never faced the battlefield that should have taken him. The conspirators leave the tent without triumph, knowing that power in the Dark Ages is never secure, even when won by blood. Their escape route coils through the fortress like a hidden vein, carrying them toward allies waiting beyond the walls. This murder does more than claim a crown. It reveals a truth that shapes every chapter still to come. In this era, political murder is not a last resort. It is a language spoken fluently by kings, queens, nobles, and warriors. It governs alliances, ends dynasties, and redraws borders long before armies march. The sun rises slowly over the fortress, washing the stone in pale gold, but it cannot cleanse what the night has written. The most ruthless threats to power have never come from distant enemies. They have always come from the hand closest to the throne. Mist settles across the battlefield at Maserfield as King Oswald kneels beside a wooden cross, tracing the grain with steady fingers. His warriors gather behind him, their shields slick with morning dew, their breath rising in thin clouds. Oswald whispers a prayer for victory, unaware that treachery already coils around him from beyond the ridge. Rival tribes move through the trees with practiced stealth, driven less by hatred and more by fear of the king's growing influence. By midday, the first clash erupts with brutal force. Spears thrust through the fog and iron rings under the weight of shields battered aside. Oswald stands at the center of the chaos, directing his men with clear, unwavering resolve. Yet each charge meets resistance that feels too coordinated, too certain. Someone has shared his tactics. Someone has revealed the weak points in his lines. As the battle turns, the king presses forward, determined to break the encirclement tightening around him. Mud clings to his boots and blood streaks his blade, but the ground itself seems to conspire against his retreat. When he falls beneath a rain of enemy blows, the battlefield freezes for a single heartbeat. The cry of triumph that follows is not joyous. It is vindictive. After the fighting ends, his body is dragged from the mire. The victors sever his head and arms, mounting them high as tokens of dominance, and attempt to erase his memory through humiliation. His followers watch from a distance, powerless to intervene. Grief hardens into something sharper, something that will shape their future choices. Oswald's faith does not shield him. His piety does not sway fortune. In the Dark Ages, devotion is easily drowned by ambition, and alliances fracture under the first sign of political gain. This betrayal deepens the documentary's central truth. Rulers during this era do not fall because they lack courage. They fall because enemies smile while sharpening their blades. Candlelight trembles against carved wooden walls as King Alboin raises a jeweled cup to his lips. The chamber is warm with wine and laughter, yet tension coils beneath the surface like a serpent waiting to strike. The cup itself carries a grotesque secret. It is made from the skull of Rosamund's father, slain by Alboin in battle. Each time he drinks, she watches the humiliation deepen, her face composed, her heart burning. Within the shadows near the doorway, Rosamund meets the gaze of Helmiches, her lover and accomplice. A silent exchange passes between them, a decision forged from grief and ambition alike. The king's guards drift in and out, unaware that treachery moves beside them. Daggers rest beneath folded cloaks. Promises linger between clenched teeth. Later that night, Alboin enters his private chamber, the wine still warm in his blood. The room glows with soft candlelight, casting gentle shapes that mask the danger creeping closer. When he collapses onto his bedding, he does not notice that his sword has been shifted out of reach. He does not sense the figures gathering behind the curtain. Rosamund steps forward, her voice low, her order unshakable. Helmiches storms the bed and the king jolts awake, hands scrambling for a weapon that is no longer there. The struggle is brief yet savage. Alboin's final breaths echo off stone, blending with the crackle of the dying candles. At dawn, the court whispers in disbelief. A warrior king celebrated for conquering nations has been struck down not by armies, but by a wife whose resolve outmatched his defenses. Power shifts instantly, as though the blood has rewritten the very laws of rule. This murder does more than avenge a father. It reveals a world where intimacy becomes a battlefield, where royal marriages hide lethal grudges, and where vengeance shapes the fate of kingdoms. In the Dark Ages, even love can draw a blade. Torches sputter in the narrow hallway leading to Papin's quarters, their light crawling across stone like restless spirits. Inside his room, Papin sits alone, studying the shadows as though expecting them to speak. His body carries the weight of his deformity, and his mind carries the bitterness that has grown with every passing year. He is the eldest son of Charlemagne, yet he is the least favored, the one destiny pushed aside. Rumors travel quickly through the palace. Papin has plotted to seize the throne. Whether the accusations are true or embellished, the result is already fixed. Charlemagne cannot allow doubt to fracture the foundation of his dynasty. One rebel son could place an empire at risk. Guards assemble at the far end of the hall. Their boots strike the floor in grim rhythm as they receive the silent command to proceed. No herald announces their arrival. No trial awaits the prince. The door bursts open, and Papin rises in shock, his plea swallowed by the clash of metal. He fights with desperation rather than hope, knowing exactly what sentence has followed him into the room. Dragged through corridors emptied in advance, Papin is taken to a cold stone cell beneath the palace. The chamber holds no symbols of royalty, no hint that the young man within it once carried the right to rule. A single torch burns above him, illuminating the moment when the guards carry out the order that will safeguard Charlemagne's future. When dawn breaks, Pepin's name is already being erased from the line of succession. His death protects brothers destined for greater strength and fewer threats. The empire mourns publicly for unity, but privately accepts the necessity of the act. This chapter exposes a dynasty that chooses survival over sentiment, revealing how royal blood becomes expendable when power demands a sacrifice. Cold light filters through the latticed windows of the great palace as Constantine VI walks the marble corridors, unaware that his mother has already sealed his fate. Servants bow quickly, eyes lowered, afraid to reveal the tension that coils through every shadowed corner. Empress Irene sits in her private chamber, fingers resting on a sealed order, her expression carved from stone. For years she has watched her son grow into a ruler determined to push her aside. Now she prepares to reclaim the throne that she believes was always hers. Meanwhile, loyal generals gather in silence, summoned by Irene's trusted eunuchs. Whispers pass through torchlit stairways, carrying commands that cannot be written, only obeyed. The plan is precise, crafted with the same discipline that once guided Byzantine ceremony. Constantine must be taken without public disturbance. The empire must see stability, not blood. By nightfall, the young emperor retires to a quiet residence on the Asian shore. Sleep does not come easily. Rebellion has stalked him for months, and every footstep outside his chambers sets his instincts on edge. When the doors burst open, he rises in panic, calling for guards who have already pledged themselves to Irene. Dragged into a dim room deep within the palace, Constantine faces the sentence his mother has prepared. The chamber is narrow, its walls absorbing the sound of struggle. Irene does not stand beside him. She remains in her throne room, waiting for the moment when the messenger will confirm that her son can never rule again. The blinding is swift, efficient, and absolute. When the act is complete, the empire receives an announcement wrapped in ritual language. The emperor has been removed for the good of the state. Irene ascends as sole ruler, cloaked in the power she purchased through maternal ruin. This chapter exposes the darkest edge of imperial ambition. In Byzantium, even a mother's love bends beneath the weight of a throne. Irene secures her crown, but history remembers the price she paid in her son's sightless silence. Storm clouds gather above Winchester as King Ethelred sits in his hall, surrounded by anxious advisors. Outside, rumors circle like wolves. Viking armies press at the coasts, yet the king's greatest fear lies within the walls of his own kingdom. Every noble with ambition becomes a threat. Every council meeting feels like a battlefield without shields. Late one evening, a feast begins with laughter, but unease settles quickly over the long tables. Eyes shift toward the door each time a guard steps inside. Ethelred watches his nobles closely, convinced that rivals plot his downfall just as the Vikings tighten their grip on English shores. Fear becomes his counsel, whispering that weakness invites death. Before dawn, orders spread quietly through the palace. Loyal warriors slip into bedchambers, pulling startled nobles from their sleep. Some die before they understand why their king has turned against them. Others plead innocence as blades descend. Ethelred's purges move swiftly from halls to outlying estates, eliminating not only rivals, but friends who appear too influential or too admired. By morning, the king stands surrounded by the silence he has created. The court is smaller, the whispers fewer, yet the empire no safer. Each murder fractures the fragile loyalty that once held the nobility together. Instead of erasing threats, Ethelred multiplies them. Rulers across the land watch in horror, questioning whether England has a leader or a frightened man destroying his own foundations. This chapter reveals a kingdom collapsing inward. Paranoia becomes policy. Murder becomes governance. Ethelred fights to keep his crown, yet every stroke of the sword draws him closer to ruin. Morning bells echo across the courtyard as Duke Wenceslas walks toward the chapel, his steps calm, his mind fixed on the feast day ahead. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Monks gather near the entrance, whispering blessings, unaware that death waits only a few paces away. Soldiers linger in the shadows behind stone arches, their hands tight around spear shafts, their orders clear. Wenceslas approaches the gate, where his brother Boleslav stands with arms wide in greeting. The embrace appears warm, even affectionate, a gesture that disarms the watching courtiers. Yet beneath Boleslav's smile lies a resolve sharpened by ambition. His grip tightens for a moment, long enough to signal the killers concealed nearby. Steel flashes. The ambush erupts with brutal efficiency. Wenceslas staggers as the first blow lands, confusion flooding his eyes. He reaches toward Boleslav, seeking help from the brother he trusted, but Boleslav steps back, allowing the attackers to close in with merciless precision. The chapel bell continues to ring, drowning the sound of Wenceslas's final pleas. As the Duke collapses against the chapel door, the courtyard falls silent. Boleslav stands over the body, breathing heavily, knowing the murder will crown him ruler of Bohemia. Yet even victory cannot silence the horror of what has unfolded. He has claimed the throne, but he has severed the bond that once tied their blood. This chapter reveals the darkest edge of ambition, betrayal delivered with an embrace. In the brutal politics of the Dark Ages, even sainthood could not protect a ruler from treachery carried out by family hands. Brotherhood becomes a gateway to murder, and power becomes the only loyalty that survives. Storm winds sweep across the Danish coast as King Harald Bluetooth stands before his council, determined to reshape his kingdom through reform and Christian unification. His vision is bold, yet it fractures the loyalties of nobles who cherish the old ways. Among them stands his son, Sweyn Forkbeard, silent but attentive, listening as resentment gathers around him like armor. Sweyn moves through the longhouses at night, speaking with chieftains angry over new laws, new faiths, and the king's expanding authority. Their frustration becomes his opportunity. Promises are exchanged over firelight. Oaths shift beneath the weight of ambition. Harold senses unrest but misjudges its depth, believing his son will protect him as the realm transforms. War rises quickly. Why armies divide along generational lines? Harold rides into battle with the defiance of a seasoned king, yet the tide turns against him. During a chaotic clash, he is struck down, wounded by warriors who once swore loyalty to his crown. He retreats, bleeding and betrayed, forced into exile while Sweyn consolidates support and claims the throne. Across the sea, Harold's final days unfold in quiet desperation. He watches ships pass on the horizon, knowing his kingdom now belongs to the son he raised. No envoy arrives with mercy. No message offers reconciliation. Sweyn's victory is complete because his father's death ensures no challenge can rise again. This chapter unveils the cruelty of ambition sharpened by blood. A father's reforms become a son's justification for rebellion. A kingdom's transformation becomes a battlefield where legacy depends on who survives, not who dreamed. In the Dark Ages, thrones often passed not through inheritance, but through the blade of a child who could no longer wait. Autumn mist settles over London as King Edmund Ironside stands before his warriors, the wounds of battle still fresh upon his body. For months he has fought with relentless courage, driving Danish invaders back with a determination that astonishes friend and foe alike. Now, at last, a fragile peace has been forged. Torches flare around the hall as Edmund raises a cup in weary triumph, unaware that his greatest threat waits beyond the battlefield. Later that night, Edmund retires to a private chamber, the weight of war lifting from his shoulders. The room is dim, warmed only by a small brazier. As he prepares to rest, the darkness stirs. An assassin, hidden in silence, steps forward with lethal intent. The strike is swift, ending the life of the king who refused to bow in open combat. By dawn, England wakes to devastation. A hero who nearly saved his realm has fallen not to an army but to treachery delivered in shadows. The treaty collapses, the throne shifts, the future bends toward Danish rule. This chapter reveals how a single hidden blade reshaped the destiny of a nation, proving that even the strongest warrior cannot defend against betrayal born in secrecy. Wind sweeps across ruined keeps and abandoned monasteries, carrying echoes of a world shaped by ambition and fear. The camera drifts over collapsed battlements and silent battlefields, reminders of rulers whose lives ended through whispers, conspiracies, and blades drawn in the dark. The narration returns to the truth that guided every chapter. The Dark Ages were defined not only by famine and invasion, but by political murders that rewrote history in a single night. Moments flicker across memory, Wenceslas falling at his brother's feet, Irene blinding her son, Harold dying in exile, Edmund struck down after victory. Each death reveals a pattern that crosses borders and centuries. Power was seldom inherited. It was hunted, defended, stolen, and extinguished through treachery that hid behind loyalty. The brutality of these ages gives way to reflection. Leadership remains vulnerable wherever ambition outweighs trust. History warns that the greatest dangers often rise from within. The chapter closes with an invitation, not a command. Viewers are encouraged to continue questioning familiar narratives, examining the shadows behind recorded events, and seeking the hidden forces that shaped the world long before their time.